Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming out. Certainly didn't appreciate this kind of. Certainly didn't expect this kind of turnout.
What a jerk!
I appreciate this kind of turnout, especially for this early on day one. So let me go ahead.
Our second biggest turnout. Our first year we had probably a little more than this, but
last
couple of years.
Yeah. First year we filled up the Cherry Blossom room.
Yeah.
So
thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
And taking precious time out of your MAGFest weekend.
Definitely.
Whose first MAGFest is this? Welcome.
All right,
welcome.
All right. Good to see you. Good to have you here. Alrighty then. So let me go ahead and do the thing that we do. Run some introductions. My name is Gabriel Strife. I'm a content creator, writer, YouTuber, and professional DM. Yes, it's a thing. As a matter of fact, my very first client is sitting right here. It's my brother Azrith Strife. Yes, that's his real name, Azirith. And
no.
I can never spell it. Azarith.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Azrith Strife, and like I said, we just spoke with Mr. Robert Aldrich over the phone, who unfortunately is not able to be with us today. There we go. All right, and I think I got a thing here.
He does have other panels this weekend. If you get the chance, go see him. He's fantastic. I saw him my first MAGFest and just fell in love with the way he does panels.
Yeah. And like I said, he's half the reason I keep coming back to MAGFest. Very first panel I saw of him, he's like the one who inspired me to start doing panels at MAGFest, and it's not that hard. So, alrighty then. So obviously, yes, like as I said, we're all here for the panel, Living in a D&D World, which we'll get to momentarily. But first, the obligatory social media-ness. So if anybody's interested, yes, I'm Gabriel Strife. Find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, at Gabriel_Strife, and at Gabriel Pro DM. Again, Azrith is at Azrith Strife? Yeah, at Azrith Strife. Yeah. And then, again, unable to be here at the moment, but Mr. Robert V. Aldrich is at RV Aldrich, and his website, teachthesky.com. So, all right. So, moving right along. If anybody has to get up and leave, this is something I say every year. If anybody has to get up and leave for any reason, I'll probably say, hey, thanks for coming. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, not trying to call you out. I literally mean that.
But we will feel personally offended.
I understand that this is MAGFest and that at any given second there's 1,000 other really cool things happening out there, and if you've chosen to spend any amount of that time with us here today, I really appreciate it. So if I see you get up to leave, I will be like, hey, thanks for coming. So, alrighty then. All right. So getting started here. So the obvious question is, who here is a fan of D&D? All right, that's just about everybody. Okay, who here? Who's relatively new to D&D? Who just started recently? Okay, all right, great. What? Oh, give my phone. Thank you. Okay, been playing for a few years, up to 5 years. Okay, quite a bit. All right, more than 5 years, up to 10, 20, 30 plus. Wow, okay.
You're so old.
All right. You and I are going to get a drink later. All right. So,
I've been gaming for 20 years, and you've been DMing for me for 14 of them.
Yeah. So, quite a while. Alrighty then. So obviously, and again, to be clear, in case somebody didn't actually bother to read, the little blurb about the panel and whatnot, we're not actually here to discuss the game itself, strategies, how to make your game better, stuff like that. This is more about D&D's impact on pop culture and the world we live in. Essentially, the reason why we are all living in a D&D world. So, and it all starts with these two gentlemen. Can anybody tell me who these are? Seriously? No, nobody? What?
You put your hand up.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Very much so. That's Gary Gygax, a guy who created the actual game Dungeons & Dragons, which came after the first game that he put up. The first game he did called Chainmail. Anybody here actually ever played Chainmail? All right, drinks are on me now. Yeah, we got an open spot here if you want to come out. All right, great. Yeah, Gygax's vision for the game that he created, Chainmail, and then what eventually became Dungeons and Dragons, was heavily inspired by the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Truth
So
be told,
much so the Tolkien estate sued him.
oh yeah, exactly. And that's the weird thing too. Like they couldn't do a game like, they actually couldn't do a game like based on Middle Earth and all that stuff. But for some reason they kind of got away with using the term halfling, but they couldn't use the term hobbit in the game. And
Yeah, because that's actually what the Gygax estate sued them over, is using the terms hobbit and treants.
Yeah. So all kinds of stuff like that. So
Fun things
obviously
you learn on the internet.
Oh yeah, exactly. So obviously, the path was already fraught with difficulty. But where it all started, for the most part, actually was in wargaming. Examples of wargaming that we have today, of course, would be Warhammer 40K. And that other one, I'm not much.
War Machine, Star Wars Legions.
There you go. Yeah, I'm not much of a wargamer. See, that's why he's here, to add in, like, to fill in the blanks and to add snarky commentary and look pretty. Yeah, you look very pretty today, by the way. Yeah, you're welcome. Anyway, Gygax primarily started off as a wargamer, and for anybody who may not be familiar with the concept, it's you have entire armies of miniatures instead of individual miniatures, and they would reenact battles. Like this picture I got was actually the Battle of the in Prussia, and it's a reenactment of that and whatnot. And so one day Gygax gets the idea, is like, instead of having a game based around entire armies, what if we focused on a single character, a single soldier in that army, and then it kind of evolved from there, because Gygax and D&D wasn't actually the first role-playing game to be invented. I think actually Orson Welles. Orson Welles is credited with designing and developing the world's first actual role-playing game back in the 30s, 40s, somewhere in there. But D&D is certainly one of, if not the most prevalent, that we have that we have today. And so that's, so like I said, that's where it essentially all stemmed from. We have the game. So we have the game of Dungeons and Dragons itself, and many people like us have grew up playing this game and really enjoyed it. And it's not only been a huge impact and huge influence on their lives, but also on other people's lives, because they carried those experiences with them through everything they did over the years. One thing that a lot of people don't consider is the sheer amount of jobs and or work that essentially D&D has created. Okay, good. I'm on the right track. There's when you sit down to play the game itself, a lot of times you have a lot of accessories for it as well. You've got miniatures and dice and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And these are all things that are either handmade or manufactured, and that means a job. That means someone actually, you go to the store and you buy a pack of dice. Someone actually had to make that. Someone actually put that in the packaging. Someone actually, someone also actually shipped it to the store so that you could, spend your hard-earned money to buy it. And one of the major impacts that we're seeing here is that in 2016, gaming accessories alone, I'm not talking about purchases of the book or gaming materials, anything like that. Gaming accessories alone, terrain, miniatures, dice, all that stuff, grossed $1.5 billion just in America. That's not even including worldwide. And I kid you not, if you include the amount of money people paid at Staples or FedEx Kinko's to print out character sheets, that number jumps to $2 billion. Yeah. So that right there is some of the impact that we're actually seeing thanks to D&D, in the economy. Not that D&D is responsible for all of that, because there's obviously more games out there than just Dungeons and Dragons. But you got all kinds of games. You have all kinds of people who make all kinds of supplemental materials for various games and whatnot. most noticeable of which, I think I got these out of order. Okay, there we go. Most noticeable of which, of course, are some of the companies that are turning these things out. Now, this is not every company out there. Chessex, Game Science, Q Workshop, Citadel Paint, which is a same company but somewhat separate financial entity. I don't know exactly how it works. Games Workshop, Dwarven Forge. A lot of people, anybody who's been watching like streaming games online, you see a lot of Dwarven Forge materials there and whatnot. These are not the most popular or most prevalent companies. These are just a handful of companies. These are literally all the companies I found with only 12 seconds of research. So they're like, I'm like, okay, who makes gaming stuff? And bam, these people popped up. But I do know Chessex and Games Workshop. They've been in business for years. Chessex makes dice. Games Workshop, they turn out miniatures and whatnot. Citadel also does miniatures, and Citadel also has their own line of paints and other accessories and things like that. All of this, all of this combined is not only income that's being generated by the game for people to enjoy the game, but it's also, like I said, it's also jobs. People do these things. People make these things, and so we have the game itself for a good number of years, and a lot of people play it, a lot of people enjoy it, and then other people decide to go ahead and capitalize on. Decided to go ahead and capitalize on not only the popularity of the game, but also the gameplay, the style of play, some of the concepts in the game and whatnot. And that's where we get not only other role playing games like. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Eric Wojcik and Kevin Zimbadia, guys who are the creative minds behind Palladium Studios, the Palladium game system. They grew up playing D&D, and they decided they wanted to do their own game as well. And one of the first games that they put out for Palladium was actually Heroes Unlimited, which is a superhero style game. TSR already had its own sci-fi setting game and superhero kind of game. Actually, I think they're the first ones to put out Marvel. Like the Marvel role playing game, and then Wojcik and Zimbadia decided to do their own thing, and so they started their own company. They started Palladium, and they at the same time they knew that it was going to be really, really difficult for them to achieve the same sort of popularity, the same sort of audience that Dungeons and Dragons had. So they figured out early on that they had to branch out to other stuff, and so they grabbed up any and all game licenses that they could, which is why Palladium has the Robotech RPG, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles RPG, and then they got those, and they built on that audience and were able to put out more stuff. So again, D&D right there is that's just one example of where D&D has become kind of like progenitor of other games and other game studios, other game systems and whatnot. For anybody who's played more than like 2 or 3 RPGs in their life, that some are more complex, some are simpler, than D&D, or at least talking about old D&D. Who here actually remembers Thaco?
Unfortunately.
Okay. If you remember Thaco, keep your hands up. Who here can calculate Thaco?
Unfortunately.
There you go. So and the rest of you are just staring at me like, what the hell is he talking about? What's this? Yeah,
Who knows what Thaco means?
Yeah. What's it mean?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
For you newer D&D players, AC used to go down. It was stupid.
Yeah, AC. Yeah, originally AC counted down from 10 instead of going up from 10, and then on top of that, fortunately everybody here has played D&D, so you know what I'm talking about. Then you add your Dex bonus into that, and then the armor that you're wearing will
you needed a math degree to figure out if you hit the monster or not.
Yeah, pretty much. And what was worse is that like the people who wrote the game, they didn't bother doing all that math when they made up a monster. Like, okay, it's AC is 6. Why? I don't know. But who cares? No one cares. Just get it out there. Just put it out there. So there's that. D&D was also responsible for other games to hit the market as well, which is, like I said, this is out of order, but that's okay. So we've got
Hero Quests.
Oh yeah. So we have Hero Quest and Dungeon. Dungeon is actually put out by TSR. It's now currently owned by Wizards of the Coast because they pretty much own everything that was TSR back in the day, including all of Gygax's hard work. And but essentially what it was almost a precursor to Munchkin. Who here has actually played Munchkin? Awesome. Okay, good. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
Well, and these games actually have roots in our modern society too, and modern gaming with like Descent and the games that Wizards actually put out, like The Legend of Drizzt, the Expedition to Ravenloft, those board games that are based around being a party and going through and fighting these monsters. Under certain scenarios, it all started right here.
Yeah, pretty much so. The actual Dungeon board game was essentially Dungeons and Dragons simplified to the nth degree. You had your heroes, you had your pieces. Everyone had like some kind of different class ability, and then everyone was also assigned a color. And then the color corresponded with a number on the monster card, and that was the number you had to roll playing that character to hit or to kill, hit or to kill the monster, which again made everything much simpler. But again, it was supposed to be more of a fun family kind of board game, where you go through this dungeon, you fight monsters and you get treasure, and then whoever has the most treasure at the end wins. And then later on, or maybe right about the same time, we got Hero Quest from Milton Bradley. Now, the people who developed and originally wrote Hero Quest were definitely inspired by D&D and were old school D&D players, because for those who played Hero Quest, you'll remember what the four characters were. You had elf, dwarf, wizard, and barbarian. But back in old school D&D, like first edition D&D, you didn't have the option of playing other races if you as a race, and then choose a character class on top of that, like we do today. So now we can have our dwarf sorcerers and our elven barbarians and all that crazy crap. But originally, if you wanted to play a dwarf, you were a dwarf, and that was your entire character class. They came with some additional abilities and whatnot. Same thing with being an elf or a halfling. And then if you were any other class, like your fighters, your paladins, and your wizards, the system just essentially assumed that you were human. And so they kind of took that fantasy flair and that simplicity, and they put it into Hero Quest. And they also again simplified the combat system with like skulls and shields on the dice and whatnot. And of course, these right here are again another example of things people did when they were younger, board games that they played, and they went on to do other things, make board games of their own, and flood the market with them. So, all right, we got that, and all right, and so. Yeah.
So bad.
And I didn't quite realize this until recently. Who here has actually watched The Toys That Made Us on Netflix? Anybody seen that? Okay, cool. Yeah. I until I watched that documentary series, I didn't quite realize that the toys came first, and then they put out a cartoon series in order to kind of sell the toys, kind of as an advertisement for the toys and get the kids to buy them and whatnot. I always thought that someone wanted to tell, the amazing story of He-Man and wanted to entertain children, and then they just happened to put out toys to kind of monetize, kind of capitalize on that. No, not the case. But that same formula, you have a product and you want to get the word out, and you want to advertise it to make it appealing to younger kids and whatnot. Then you make a cartoon series about it. The Dungeons and Dragons cartoon series was very much that. Not only to kind of promote the game itself, but also. Not only to promote the game itself, but also to promote a line of toys that they had. at the time. There was a whole dragon dungeon kind of play set kind of thing. Me and my brother had when we were younger. That was loads of fun. But again, and again, for everybody who actually grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons, some of them probably, a lot of them saw this as well, and then remember that, remember what it was like. So already with in television and whatnot, D&D, when by the time this cartoon series came out, D&D was already making an impact on pop culture. It was recognizable enough. The name was recognizable enough to where, as with everything else that revolves around D&D, people were split on the subject, whether or not to let your kids watch it, whether you do, you don't, or people who believe that, people who believe or had a problem with D&D because believing it was satanic or had satanic or occult undertones and stuff like that, which, don't get me wrong, depending on the kind of game you're playing, it absolutely could. But again, that's more a matter of, that's more of an opinion of taste and what flavor you're looking for. And so from here, over the years, again, people who grew up playing D&D, people who grew up watching D&D, they go up and they grow up to do their own things. They make their own TV shows, their own movies and whatnot, which may or may not have given us the flaming pile of horseshit that was the Dungeons and Dragons movie with Jeremy Irons. We had many years ago.
The only redeeming quality of that movie was Jeremy Irons.
Oh yeah. I thought William Shatner was brilliant in that movie. So,
are you messing with me? Was he in that movie?
No, he wasn't in that movie. But
okay.
but the chick who played the Empress was like full on William Shatnering that shit.
Oh,
so
yeah. That's how much I remember that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of blocked it out, right? Yeah, like horrible trauma. Yeah. So, but along with that, over the years, we have gotten a few. With that, we have gotten a few. We've taken a few steps, I guess you could say, in the right direction, because there've been a few more fan made as well as actually like produced. D&D movies that have come out, like the animated movie was based on the Chronicles of Dragonlance. There was that. Felicia Day did a D&D movie too, I think. I'm trying to remember what that one.
Did she?
Yeah. So what's that? No.
No.
It wasn't the Guild. She was in an actual movie, actual D&D movie. But I'm glad you bring that up. So. Another fine example of its impact on pop culture. So, you have the kids. So we have the kids watching back in the early '80s. We have the kids watching Saturday morning cartoons, watching the D&D cartoons and whatnot. And of course, the popularity of the show either speaks for itself or it doesn't. And then around 1986, who can tell me what significant event happened in 1986? Anybody, take a wild guess. Good, that's a big one. Yeah, totally. Okay, yeah. You actually remember the Challenger explosion. Legend of, okay, yeah, but how did we get Legend of Zelda? Exactly, thank you. Yeah. What happened? All right. Yep. We finally got the Nintendo Entertainment System. It first came out in 1986. I'm not exactly sure what year or month it was made available in America, but right about that time is where that happened. And then we with any new gaming system, just like the Atari or other systems before it, one of the big things that the creators of the system, as well as people who write software, needed is they need content, and for that content, we got Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy. This is gonna be the whole panel. I'm just asking people who did what and where they're, and who remembers what. Who here has actually played the original Final Fantasy on the original cartridge on the original Nintendo Entertainment System? Awesome. We're getting drinks later. You may want to come along. Okay. And so one of the things that I mentioned in the panel that I did last year, which was called Conversion for Immersion, it was all about changing, using established books, TV, movies, or even video games as a backdrop, as a setting for your game. I only mentioned it because, like I've said before, no one showed up to that panel, so I feel like I should be getting something out of it. But one of the points that we brought up in that was the fact that Final Fantasy, when it comes to playing an RPG, running an RPG, Final Fantasy is straight up D&D, and that is actually and that's actually not nowhere more noticeable or obvious than in the first Final Fantasy game, and so. Again, the creators of Final Fantasy, a lot of people involved in the programming, a lot of them involved in making the game itself, also huge fans, if not avid players, of D&D. And the best place where you see an example of this is actually in the spellcasting. That's my party that I made up before I came to MAGFest, just so I can get the screenshot. All right, so.
It's a good party comp.
Yeah. So got a fighter, got a black belt, got a white and a black mage, and everything. Didn't put a lot of imagination into the names and everything. But if you notice down at the bottom of the screen where you've got the 2 and all the zeros and everything, that right there, for those of you who may remember, is like the exact shorthand that people would use not only for writing on their character sheets, but also when you look up monsters in the monster manual in the DMG. That's the shorthand for spell slots. Now here's the thing though. The white and the black mage, if you count, only have spell slots. Obviously, they can't cast anything above first level yet, but they only have spell slots going up to level 8. Where in D&D we actually have 9 levels of spells. Anybody venture a guess why that was? 8-bit, yeah. I'm actually funny you bring that up. Again, one of the panels that Mr. Robert Aldrich did that we saw was weapons as characterization, and one of the things that he talked about was how at the time, and he brought up examples like Rygar, Castlevania, Mega Man, things like that. At the time, of course, and it's technically still true, essentially still true today. The programmers were limited to what they can do, what they could program into a game by the limitations of the system. So that's why Simon Belmont wields a whip, which is just a little line that comes out of the guy's hand. Mega Man shoots little lemons across the screen, stuff like that. All kinds of lemons. all kinds of simple stuff like that. But and that's a good, like I said, that's a good idea. That's a good guess. But so obviously it is dealing with the limitations of what the system can do. But anybody else have an idea as to why the spells only go up to 8th level instead of 9th? Yeah. Say again? Copyright could be an issue. Yeah. Okay. Any other guesses? Anybody else? Spacing? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Spacing could definitely be a thing. Oh yeah, because that's pretty much takes up the bottom of each of those little blocks and whatnot. So, but I was actually thinking again in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, and thinking even more simply, 9th level spell is when you get something like Wish. So
you can't really program Wish into a video game.
You cannot program Wish into a video game. So they had to stop. So they had to stop at 8. And plus also with the given the simplicity of the system as well as the game and the gameplay, there really was only so many things that they could do with that, program into it, and of course everything had to have some kind of combat effect. The only real out of combat effect that you saw in the spellcasting was like things that would heal your party or cure poison, stuff like that. Because again, the game is primarily deals with moving around the world and getting into random battles where you kill monsters and get gold, not unlike playing Dungeon all over again. Alrighty, so
I feel like D&D had such a profound effect on Final Fantasy that it generally maintained that system all the way through Final Fantasy's life. It just changed from spell slots to mana points, which some game systems have changed to. Instead of a select number of spells that you can cast, you have a pool of magic that you can pull from.
Pretty much. And so the popularity of games like this, not just Final Fantasy, but games like this, such as Dragon Warrior, where you have a experience gaining level based mechanic for improving the character, for advancing, becoming stronger as you move along. And of course, the idea is you don't have to do this, but the idea is along the way you gain enough money, enough treasure from the monsters to equip yourself with stronger weapons and armor, learn better spells and things like that. And this is something. This is very, very base. The very, very base of this concept is something that carried through into a lot of games, into a lot of other games, up to the point where we finally started to see actual Dungeons and Dragons titles being released for game systems like the Sega Master System, the Nintendo, and the other one, and excuse me. And you just see more and more of it as we go through, and as game systems and gaming itself is evolving. And then we have things like Final Fantasy II or Final Fantasy IV, depending on how you prefer that, released for the Super Nintendo. And then also Final Fantasy III or VI, again, depending on how you look at it. Also for the Super Nintendo, and then we got Final Fantasy VII with the advent of the PlayStation. But again, it's not just Final Fantasy. There were other games out there. Other games out there that were put out for these systems that were very, very much role playing game style play. You didn't always have a lot of choices for like interaction like you would in a real round the table paper pen face to face kind of game. But it was it was what it was. It did as best as it could. And then other game studios started releasing their games for console gaming as well, such as Shadowrun, which many people call the bastard child of D&D and Cyberpunk, and I tend to agree, but it's still made for a really, really fun game. Shadowrun, of course, was put out for the Shadowrun game was put out for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. Sorry, I couldn't remember the name there for a second. And then we see other major actual Dungeons and Dragons titles that were either campaign settings or adventure modules, such as Baldur's Gate and Eye of the Beholder and things like that. And so through gaming, through the video gaming, this continues until we get to the era where we have a lot more PC gaming, and that gave us Diablo. So with Diablo, while you still have the mana pool and the leveling mechanic, you actually have you have your choice of a few different character classes that you can play, and you play through it. And of course, with Diablo by Blizzard, that also gave us BattleNet, which was probably not the first, but one of the best online platforms for getting one of the best online platforms, certainly at the time, for playing the game, for playing things like Diablo. And then of course BattleNet just expanded from there. Eventually because you could go in and you could play, if you had a copy of like regular Warcraft, not World of Warcraft. This is way back in the day. If you had a copy of Warcraft, you could play against other people online there. But then again, Diablo and Warcraft, this gives rise to other games that we're more familiar with. Your RPG and leveling based MMOs and World of Warcraft. Ascension, Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars: Old Republic. Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. Star Wars: The Old Republic, and
not
like
as good as Knights of the Old Republic.
Yeah, and the games the library of games just continues to expand and expand. And And so with we've gotten to the point, and so now we've gotten to the point where just about any game that you're dealing with, or just about any MMO certainly has that experience gaining sort of level jumping mechanic.
Well, not only that, but with the advent of the BattleNet and the online play, it brought a sense of community to the gaming industry and the gaming world that was only seen in tabletop RPGs.
Very true. Yes. Yeah. Good point. So, all right, and so there are as far as, and also in regards to D&D's impact on pop culture, there are a lot of people out there who've actually who played D&D. Might recognize some of these faces up there. Some of the ladies might recognize those abs down below.
Joe Manganiello's from Pittsburgh, by the way. It's awesome.
Yeah, and So and a lot of celebrities, people who are celebrities now, also who grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of that influence and a lot of the things that they've learned, that they've taken with them, carries into and can be seen in a lot of the stuff they do. And a lot of these people, and according to recent interviews that most of the people depicted up here have given, a lot of them are actually still playing Dungeons and Dragons. They're actually still still creating content for it, for their own players and for their own people and everything. When it comes to celebrities per se who've played D&D or been influenced by D&D, the two that actually come to mind the most for me is actually Jim Butcher and Lowell K. Hamilton. Jim Butcher, the author of the Dresden Files series, big D&D fan. He also wrote that other series, and Laurel K. Hamilton, most famous for the Anita Blake series. One thing that a lot of people oftentimes overlook is that she's actually also written D&D books. She's actually also added to the library of novels that are placed in a D&D setting, a D&D world, such as Ravenloft. She wrote Death of a Dark Lord, and a lot of people over the years who grew up playing D&D also wanted to like add their own touch and add their own flavor to it as well. And that's why you have literally a library of different books, like I mentioned earlier, the Dragonlance Chronicles of Krynn, such as
R.A. Salvatore.
R.A. Salvatore, yeah, and the R.A. Salvatore with
the only books about Forgotten Realms are about Drist.
Yeah, Drizzt Do'Urden and Bruna Battlehammer. Who's an actual like D&D character in one of the games. Yeah, I stole the name. I totally stole the name.
I know.
Okay. So we have books set in the Ravenloft setting, the Greyhawk setting, Forgotten Realms setting, things like that. And all these people are people who have enjoyed playing D&D and wanted to add their own touch to the story, add their own touch to make their mark on not only the world but also make their mark on the world through writing about D&D and D&D characters, D&D style characters, people who live in these fantastic worlds that we all know and love. All right. So, if I'm not mistaken, I think I know what the next one is. Speaking of celebrities who play D&D, who here watches Critical Role? Who here loves Critical Role? Whose nipples get hard when I say Critical Role? I knew it. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you back there. All right. Anything you want to add?
Oh, I mean, so with the advent of Critical Role and the stream that started basically the resurgence of D&D in modern culture, it brought geekdom further than it's really ever been, to where professional D&D player is actually now a job. Like, it's not even just Critical Role. There are, on any given day, you can go on Twitch and find dozens and dozens of games just being streamed online, and it's pretty remarkable as a gamer who, growing up as a kid, obviously we were all ostracized for it, to where now it's the cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah, because now we can make money doing it. Yeah. So yeah, all the because of that, not just because of Dungeons and Dragons, but or Critical Role, because of that, professional gamer, professional DM, it's totally a thing now. If you know what you're doing, if you know how to properly market it, like any other product or service that that can be made available to the public. Professional gaming, professional DMing, totally a thing.
And oddly, going back to the slide with like Joe Manganiello, I was watching an interview with him, and the culture has actually changed so far in the other direction, where now nerds are actually ostracizing people that don't look like they should be playing D&D. And that's actually what Joe Manganiello started Jox Machina for, was to know we can play D&D. I've been playing D&D for as long as I can remember. I started these groups with all these people in Hollywood. I mean, the Big Show from WWE plays D&D with Joe Manganiello. Like, so it's to learn that the culture went so far the other way to where geeks were now being the ostracizers.
Yeah,
it was kind of crap.
Yeah. So right there, that's that in and of itself, again, a major impact that D&D, just by existing, by being what it is, has affected our lives, affected pop culture, and certainly one of the reasons why we're all essentially now living in a D&D world. So that's it for the most part.
Now more so than ever, really.
Yeah, exactly. So that's it for the most part. One thing I like to end my videos and my panels with is a bit of a quote. So just want to hit you with this real quick. This is a work of fiction. Still, given an infinite number of possible worlds, it must be true on one of them. And if a story set in an infinite number of possible worlds is true in one of them, then it must be true in all of them. So maybe it's not as fictional as we think. These words are given to us by Neil Gaiman. Alrighty. So that's pretty much it. We'll certainly be open to questions. Other than that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thanks for listening. And thanks for coming to check out our panel here at MAGFest. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Equitas Veritas Bellatus.
Does anybody have any questions? Cool.
All right, good. Because we're hungry. We want to go eat. Thank you very much for coming.